Our last speaker for the day is Anand Daniel. He's a 96 batch computer science alumni. It so happened that all our three speakers for today are from the computer science department. So Anand Daniel is a partner with Axel Partners, a leading global venture capitalist firm. He focuses on technology startups in consumer, healthcare and education sectors. Anand also holds an MBA from the MIT Sloan School of Management, an MS in Electrical Engineering from Purdue University, in addition to SVCE as well. So, Anand, I welcome you to give us our talk.
Hi, thanks. Pleasure being here. College busல போற மாதிரியே இருக்கு. ஏன்னா லாஸ்ட் இப்போதான் உட்காந்து ஸ்லைட்ஸ் பண்ணிருக்கேன் நான். என்ன கோகுல் used to be there. எக்ஸாம் போற வழியில் he'll come and say, hey, இந்த சாப்டர் சொல்லி கொடுறா அப்படின்னுவான். ஞாபகம் இருக்கா? How many of you remember that? Yeah. So I was on the same case like others say. So it's a pleasure being here. My quick journey after SVCE, I went to the US like many of you, did my masters at Purdue in electrical. After that, I had options to join a startup, a couple of startups, or join Intel. Ended up joining Intel. It was a safe option at that time, and spent about 7 years at Intel doing chip design. Loved doing that. Really grew within Intel, and then thought I have enough of engineering. Let me go and do my get business education. So went to MIT Sloan for my MBA. I was lucky to get sponsored by Intel to go do the MBA. And that was also actually a safe move. So because Intel said you go, you don't have to pay anything, finish your MBA and come back and work for us. So between the years, I was lucky to work with Intel Capital, which is the venture capital arm of Intel. So I did venture capital investing, which is what ended up becoming my career post Sloan. 2007 is when I graduated, and after that I've been mostly in the VC and startup ecosystem. So after MIT, I went in. I didn't go back to Intel, so that was the first time I took a reasonable risk, and I said, forget about fees, forget about big investment. I'll drop all that. I'll pay it out of my pocket. Went and joined another venture capital fund called Flybridge Capital, which is one of the premier funds in Boston. So learned from 4 or 5 people who've been doing venture capital investing for about 15-20 years. So I spent 3 years with them, learning a lot. Then my plan was like many people who go to the US to come back to India. It's just that always you say next year I'll go. So finally ended up deciding next year was 2010. So me and my wife, we had 2 young kids. Said this is now or never. So we packed our bags and moved back. And I joined a place called Axel Partners. And that's where I've been for the past 5 years. So I have about 5-10 slides. There's more. How many of you are 35 or below? Good. Wow. Okay. So you have a lot. That's great. Okay. I was thinking how old am I and calculating and all that. Yeah. So this is a great place. So for 35 and above, I might not be that relevant. So, யாரும் இல்லை பரவாயில்ல நிறைய பேர் தூக்கிட்டாங்க young at heart. See, my thing is actually this applies probably for 35 and above also. But what I'm going to cover is stuff that I probably knew about the startup world, probably when I was at any age, from the time when I graduated from SVC to when I graduated from Intel to when I graduated from Purdue to Sloan, right? And then what's happening in the Indian entrepreneurial ecosystem. So broadly, I have about 5 to 8 slides. We'll quickly go through that. The reason being, when I graduated from Purdue, as I said, I had an option to go and join a startup called Reliance Computer at that time, right? So which I said was a little bit risky. They were not paying, they were probably pay-wise, they were matching Intel. They were maybe slightly lesser, but they gave a lot of stock options. I didn't know what stock options meant at that time. This is 97, 98. I should have known, but didn't do my research. And so, but I ended up not joining. I ended up referring a couple of my classmates. Actually, Vinod, some of you know, and two other friends actually ended up joining that company. And within 2 years, that company got sold for $1 billion, right? So I said, wow, okay. And then these guys had made enough money to not worry about money for a long time, right? So and then that's on one side, they were comfortably set. on a personal front from a financial comfort point of view. And on the other side, they also had learnt a lot more. I didn't tell. I owned probably 125th or of the Pentium processor or whatever I was working on at that time. I felt great about it, but these guys worked on a whole chip themselves, right? So it was, any way you look at it, working at a startup is a super exciting thing. Highly risky, but super exciting. How many entrepreneurs here? Right? So you guys know about it already. So please convert the rest of the people in the room, right? So can we go? Can someone help me with the slides? So quickly, what is Axel? So just to set context here, venture capital fund. We've been there for 30 years across the globe. Started in US, set up Europe about more than 10 years back, and India we've been here since 2005 also. So we've invested in more than 300 odd companies. In India, we have about 90 plus companies, right? Some of the more well-known ones are listed here. So Flipkart, Myntra, Book My Show, Taxi for Sure. We invest across different sectors: consumer technology, enterprise software, global SaaS software, and healthcare are the three main verticals where we invest. So this is where I spend most of my time. The past 5 years is been in investing in India, right? So first, I want to start with a case study. Next slide, please. Yeah. So actually, I don't think this is the one. Okay. I think so. One second. Technology difficulty illa na kashtam. Is there one more? Just open it from the hard drive itself. Okay, open it again. That's right. The PowerPoint. Yeah. Yeah, this is the one. Okay, so I'm going to start with a case study which is very close to where we are. How many of you know of Freshdesk? Wow. Okay, good. For those who know also, and plus probably for the remaining, this is a company started by a guy, an entrepreneur called Girish Matrabodham. How many of you know of Zoho, a startup in Chennai? Right? How many people working in Zoho? Great. Wow, awesome. Good. So Girish, you know, right? So Girish is a guy who graduated from college like SVC, right? So not any outstanding. I'm saying IITs and all that. You hear only about startups being done only by IITians and or people who went to top schools and things like that. But SVC is one of those colleges, is what I want to make a case for, and I'm hoping that there'll be a lot more Girishes coming out of SVC, right? What I mean by that is Girish graduated from a college, Shastra College in Tanjavur, and worked in Zoho for about 7, maybe close to 10 years. He was managing a division which he started from scratch and grew to about 50 million plus within Zoho, right? Then he saw a market opportunity in customer support software, right? So for people who don't know this, there's this whole world of software as a service, right? Most of you know about it. So where you can build software sitting out of anywhere and service customers across the globe. So what Girish found was there was some problems in this customer support software world, and he identified a gap in that market, some specific product features. He was an outstanding product manager. So him and his co-founder Shan and a couple of others came out of Zoho and set up this company. This is 2011, right? So and then they started hacking this Freshdesk customer support software, and when we met them, they had about 40 paying clients. So no one paid them, but it was just people who were trying the product and giving great feedback. So that's when we decided to invest in this company, right? So this is 2011, and it was just a belief that at that time, yes, Zoho had done it, but from a venture capital world, no one had invested in a company that was sitting out of India and servicing the globe. People were comfortable investing in services companies. So many of you have and or continue to work in big services companies which have created a mark for India in the services world, right? So big companies there. But on this, other than Zoho, there were no other company you could point to and say it has created global impact. So this was a big bet for us, that you can create a world-class company sitting out of India and Chennai in particular. So Girish and co over the past 4 years have really grown this company. So from where they were, right now they've raised close to $100 million, but more importantly, they're servicing close to 50,000 customers across 150 countries, right? So sitting out of Chennai, right? So it's super impactful, and this guy is still down to earth. If you meet him, you'll all love this guy. He's like who has met them. So the point I want to make is it was a bet, right? For him, he had to make a career move. He was earning really well in Zoho. He had to give up. He was 10 years, probably sub 35, right? Close to that, right? But he could have comfortably stayed where he was and continued on. But he took the bet and plunged and got into entrepreneurship, and now he's succeeded. So far at least he succeeded. Yes, still you get an exit, you don't know, but still what matters is he's having global impact, touching tens of thousands of customers across the globe and employing close to probably 500 people sitting out of Chennai. So I think if Girish can do it sitting out of Chennai, so can any of us here, right? That's the call I want to make out today for people at various stages of career. And going next slide. So few things I want to cover today. These are some of the sectors which I've already mentioned. We can skip this. So what I want to cover is mainly what is the life cycle of a startup. So for some of you, you're already in a startup. You probably know this, but still, if you look at it from a overall life cycle of a startup, and the next subsequent slide I want to cover, how do you look at startup as a career option? So please go back to the previous one. So this is what I want to spend next 5 minutes on. So if you look, there's the conceptualizing stage. We talked about Girish coming up with the idea and self-funding that. So there is three columns here: stage of the startup, funding source, and funding amount. So funding is what I really understand well. So that's why there's a lot of funding, and you'll hear that word repeatedly. But if you look, many startups make or break because of lack of capital, right? So that's why it's an important one. So I'm not saying all startups need to raise funding from outside, but funding is one of the main ingredients in fuel of growing a startup, as most of you can imagine. So what are the stages? So there's concept stage, and there's an early acceleration where you can go and work with what is called as accelerators now, which are become pretty available all throughout India. Then there's the seed stage of a startup, Series A, Series B, and beyond till exit. So that's the leftmost column. Then what are the funding sources? When you're at the concept stage or at a very early stage, it's mostly self or your friends and family. Then nowadays there's this option called accelerators, which will fund you anywhere from a few lakhs of rupees to 5-10 lakh of rupees or so. Then comes the seed stage. Again, it's mostly angel investors. So you go to people who have been 20 years, 15 years plus, the 35 plus crowd from SVCE or the angels. Hopefully you can go and hit them up and ask them to fund you, right? So that's the seed stage. There are a few VCs, including us, who invest at that stage, but there are only a few of them. So, and the amount of seed investment, if you look at India across last year, about $2 billion was invested overall across 1,000 companies in India, right? So, and seed probably is about half of that, and most of that is not from venture capital funds, but it's mostly it's either angel investors or friends and family and other sources, right? This is the state of India. For the whole of India, there's only about 1,000 companies that got funded last year. So as exciting as the startup world is, it's also a hyper competitive world. So for every 1,000 companies that any investor sees, a venture capital investor sees, or for every 100 at least, maybe one gets funded, right? So that's the ratio. The odds are pretty small, but if you get through that hurdle and raise a good seed round, which is normally $500,000 or 3 crore rupees or more, then that gives you 12 to 18 months to prove out whether your product can work. Going back to Fresh Desk, they raised a seed of close to $1 million. That gave them a runway of 12 to 18 months, and they could actually build out a product in more detail, hire people, have an office and all that. This is where you can't have a fancy office and all that, but still you still can do what is really needed to build your product or your service. Then you go on from there. Once you've proven your product and there's a fit between the product that you're building or the service you're offering and the customers, that's when you go in for something called as a Series A, which is normally done by venture capital investors like Axel, and there's probably 10-20 firms in India that invest in this particular stage. And it's normally, I've put 2 to 5 million, but the good thing about the Indian market right now is seed has become 2 million and Series A has become 5 to 10 million. So there's so much demand to invest in India. So the amount of capital that's going into these stages, this slide I did a few months back, so it's actually changed in the last 6 months. So, and beyond that, I don't know if it's very relevant, but companies continue to raise capital every 12 to 18 months. Stop me if there are any questions. Okay, so this might be new to some of you, so feel free to ask any questions. Okay, so far with me. So this is the life cycle of a startup. So next slide, please. So now, and click twice. Yeah. So the same thing, the different stages, and how for people who are actually looking to do a startup, you're probably going to be in the concept stage, acceleration stage, or seed stage. You'll join as a co-founder of a startup, right? What's called as a co-founder. You're founding the startup. Ideally, my recommendation is have at least one or two other co-founders, and not more than three, right? Yes, there have been startups that have had 4, 5, 7, 10 also, but ideally 2, 3 people is a good team, and try and balance that out with different skill set. So if one of them is a technology co-founder, other can be a business person, third can be an operations person. It's good to find balance, not necessarily a mirror image of. I've seen that happen in many startups. So the reason why I'm not saying not more than 3 if possible is because it gets complicated as things start scaling in a startup. There's always issues, right? Even Beatles had issues, all the bands had issues, right? So it's similarly, there's egos, there's other things that come into play. So just like music analogy, Sashi is there, so that's why I'm saying. So similarly, there are specific roles that each band member, or in this case co-founder, plays, right? So identify that and don't have too much redundancy possible in the co-founding team. Coming back, the risk of doing this is very high, and we'll talk about financially also in the subsequent slide, but the reward also is the highest if you can go and co-found a company along with a couple of your friends. Need not be from SVCE alone, from anywhere, right? Click please. And then if let's say you're at a point where you don't want to take that risk, right? You want to go and join a startup, then you join a Series A or B plus company. The later the stage, the lower the risk, which means the company has raised more capital, has the staying power to be there for the next 12, 18 months. Even if the company is not doing well, you'll have time to recover. As an employee, you'll know that the company is not going anywhere. The company will normally have cash for 12 to 24 months. So you'll have time to find another job and move. So for people who are slightly risk averse, for it's either age or your mental mindset, however it is, right? So that's probably a great way to get your feet wet in the startup world and then move on and go earlier stage to take more risk. Any questions on this? If not, we'll move to the next slide. So just keep clicking. So here what I've tried to capture is, I told you already, the rewards and risks. So the reward is responsibilities. The example I told you, Vinod, who was my roommate, was designing a whole chip when I was designing a small subset. That same thing applies. In a startup, it's a fire hose. There's so much work to be done. There's no boundaries, and you can do as much as you want. So that's one of the biggest rewards, because whatever you learn there, on the con side and the risk side, I've had failure of a startup. But in India now, when I moved back, it is seen as a failure. But today, when a startup shuts down, and many of our startups have wound down, there's a huge army of other startups who want to recruit from them, right? So people don't look at a startup as a startup not working out as a failure of the employees or the founders. It's just the market reality. Startups are meant to, not every startup is going to become big, right? So the responsibilities and the learning that you get and the impact that you have in your existing startup, irrespective of whether it makes it big or not, it kind of offsets the risk that you're taking, right? And then if you look at it financially, I want to just highlight what happens, right? So most startups, you raise money, multiple rounds and everything, but the hope is, if it's a venture capital backed startup, the exit will at least be, I put 500 crores, but at least be $100 million, or now it's 600 crores or more. Kind of an exit is at least the expectation, right? And if you're a co-founder of such a startup, you end up owning 10 to 15% of that startup. So you can do the math. That's 50 to 75 crores of rupees that you would make as a co-founder. I'm saying you'll own 10 to 15% because over time you would have raised a lot of money and the equity you hold keeps going down. So to get to exit of 500 crore plus, you would have raised maybe 100 crore plus, and you would have diluted yourself to 10-15% of equity in the company. And but even with that, you'll make 50 to 75 crores, right? And then if you're one of the top employees, you'll probably own between 0.5 and 1%, and that translates to 2.5 to 5 crores of rupees, right? So which by itself is a reasonable amount. Now let's compare that. Click again, please. So let's compare that one to what's going to happen. Let's break your life into a 10-year cycle, right? So if you can do 3 startups in a 10-year period, and I have the fortunate thing to advise a lot of people who graduate from different colleges to a startup career. So this is something that I share with most of them, including people who are in different age groups. It could be you could be in your early 20s, your early 30s, or early 40s. This probably applies to everyone. So one of the reasons we work is for your satisfaction, job, passion, and everything. The other is the financial security. So this addresses the financial security aspect of it. So if you divide your life into 10-year chunk, and you take a 3 startups in those 10 years. So in the first 2-3 years, you'll know whether a startup is working. If it's working, you stay on. If not, move on to the next one and move on to the next one, so forth. Even if one of them work out and you do the math, if you do how much you'll earn and how much you'll save, it'll be between 30 and 50 lakh rupees in that 10-year period, most likely, maybe something in that. But even if one of these startups work out, that provides you a lot more financial security. And the numbers I've listed out here are very, very conservative, right? So for example, we had backed a company called Myntra, which got acquired by Flipkart. That was a $300 million outcome, or 1,800 crores. Right? There was another company in our portfolio called Taxi for Sure. Within less than 3 years, the company went from zero to $200 million in valuation, or 1,200 crores, and got sold. These are all public numbers. And you can imagine what kind of value that created for the founders as well as the employees. So at least the founders and plus the top 20-30 employees made a lot more than this, right? So this is just a couple of examples. Obviously, this is talking about the success side. For every 1 or 2 success, there's I told you 90 other companies in our portfolio, right, which are still in the works, and it takes a lot of hard work. It doesn't work overnight. But if it works out, it's a great financial outcome. So I want to encourage you to think and break it down your career, if you're looking at startup as an option, in this fashion, and pick an area that you're passionate about, right? Whether it be education or healthcare, or it could be a passion because of industry, or it could be a passion because of your skill set. You could be really good at sales, marketing, technology, whatever it is, right? And then find the right startup, and go and join that startup, and hopefully we'll join for people who don't want to take that risk of starting on your own. But if you can, especially if you have in India, I used to live in the valley, Silicon Valley, where unless 2 people work, you can't even survive. And so India is not like that. If you look at Chennai or Bangalore, even if one spouse works, whether the husband or the wife, you can comfortably live, and the other person can take a risk. This is all the practical nature of things. Chennai, there's a bunch of startup activities happening, but if you look at Bangalore, there's a lot more happening. It's the unfortunate truth, but that's what's happening. So if you guys are here, if you want to take this plunge, I would encourage you to look not only here but also in Bangalore, right? I'm not saying. And if you're open, I'm more than happy coming back as an alum, more than happy to be helpful and see if we can connect those interested. If you can be specific about this is the area I'm interested in, and these are the kind of startups. Most of the startups are listed on our website, axel.com, or it could be if you go and look at yourstory.com or Next Big What or VC Circle or even TechCrunch, most of the Indian startups are covered there. Right? You'll find which one catches your passion, catches your fancy. Let me know, I should be able to connect you there. Okay, so I think I have a few more. I think I've covered the key messages that I wanted to cover. With that, I'll stop, and if there are any, we'll address the questions in the panel. Yeah? Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
I'd like to call upon Hema to present the speakers with a small token of our appreciation. Hema, outstanding as usual. Yeah, Praveen. Ajay. Anand.
Before I give this to you, I need to say something about Danny. He's my brother's classmate. Only guy in 1996 batch who didn't drag me.
Next, we'll be having a panel discussion with the speakers. I call upon Vineet to moderate the session and the speakers as well, Praveen, Ajay, and Anand.